Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. Aboard the sleek, crystal-lined corridors of the Galactic's vessel Nihilection, Commander Drelex hovered over the holographic projection of Earth. The blue-green sphere rotated serenely, its surface dotted with white cloud formations that reminded him of the nebulae near the Trillion Rift. Humans, Drelex muttered, his voice vibrating in harmonic chords that conveyed both awe and pity. Such fragile, chaotic creatures. Yet ingenious, interjected RHLT, one of the vessel's youngest and most curious envoys. Their reliance on primitive tools has allowed them to flourish. This device, for instance. The hologram shifted to display a peculiar object, a brightly colored, vaguely cylindrical item that resembled a part of human anatomy. Drelex's tendrils quivered in fascination. Explain its function again, Drelex commanded. RHLT adjusted their translator implant before speaking. This device, Commander, is central to their reproduction. Their species appears incapable of sustaining its population without it. We intercepted numerous transmissions, advertisements, testimonials, instructional guides. Humans place great importance on its acquisition and proper use. Drelex nodded gravely. Then it is settled. Humanity's survival depends on this technology. We must acquire it before their fragile ecosystem collapses further. Moments later, RHLT found themselves in an advanced Galactic's morphing chamber, their shimmering exoskeleton dissolving into the shape of an unassuming human male. Equipped with a rudimentary understanding of Earth customs and a vague sense of human etiquette, they were transported to Earth's surface. RHLT materialized in a bustling urban district, disoriented but determined. Their target loomed ahead, a small shop with a neon sign that read Intimate Horizons. The emissary strode inside, head high and mission clear. The store clerk, a woman with bright pink hair and an amused smirk, greeted them. Looking for something special? RHLT nodded solemnly. I require the finest human reproductive device. It is of utmost importance to my people. The clerk blinked, then burst into laughter. Well, you've come to the right place, buddy. Moments later, RHLT stood awkwardly in the aisle, holding an assortment of bizarre items that bore little resemblance to anything they had studied in Galactic's archives. Which of these ensures optimal procreation efficiency? They asked earnestly, holding up a glittery object shaped like a heart. The clerk stared. You mean like for fun? Or, wait, are you serious right now? Before RHLT could respond, another customer, a middle-aged man, chimed in with a bemused grin. You're not from around here, are you? RHLT stiffened. They had been warned about human curiosity. My origins are irrelevant. I must secure this technology for the survival of my species. The man chuckled nervously, glancing at the clerk. All right, buddy. Good luck with that. As the exchange continued, RHLT's odd behavior drew the attention of others in the shop. Whispers spread, and someone discreetly called local law enforcement. By the time RHLT left the store, their arms full of items they assumed were vital to humanity's reproduction, 2 officers were waiting outside. Sir, one officer began, eyeing RHLT's peculiar haul, we need to ask you a few questions. RHLT's translator buzzed with the unfamiliar inflections of authority. They took a cautious step back. I mean no harm. I seek only to preserve your species. The officers exchanged bewildered looks before one muttered, We've got a live one here. As sirens blared in the distance, RHLT realized their mission had become far more complicated than anticipated. RHLT stood frozen as the officers closed in, their human guise maintaining a calm but slightly bewildered expression. Inside, however, their alien mind raced. The situation was spiraling out of control, and the strange devices in their arms, heavy with human misunderstanding, were now a liability. The taller officer, a man with a sharp jawline and a clipboard of authority, cleared his throat. Sir, we've had reports of unusual behavior. Care to explain what you're doing here? RHLT adjusted their grip on the bundle of glittering objects and attempted a disarming smile. I am acquiring essential reproductive technology. Your species' survival may depend on it. Both officers stared. The shorter one, a woman with sharp eyes, stifled a snort. Reproductive technology? From Intimate Horizons? RHLT nodded earnestly, their translator adding a touch of grave sincerity to their tone. It is vital. Without it, humanity's continuation is at risk. The taller officer's bemusement shifted into suspicion. You're not serious, are you? Before RHLT could answer, a new voice cut through the tension. Hold on. What's going on here? The officers turned to see a slender woman with dark, determined eyes and a satchel slung over her shoulder. Dr. Mia Carter had been on her way home when she noticed the growing commotion. A renowned biologist with a knack for unorthodox research, she wasn't one to let strange happenings pass without investigation. The shorter officer sighed. Dr. Carter, this guy here claims he's collecting reproductive technology to save humanity. From a novelty store. Dr. Carter raised an eyebrow and stepped closer, her gaze locking onto RHLT's. Something about his posture, the overly precise way he spoke, and the sheer absurdity of his claims sparked her curiosity. All right, she said, crossing her arms. Let's hear it. What exactly do you mean by reproductive technology? RHLT hesitated, sensing that this human was more perceptive than the others. I have studied your kind extensively. The devices within this establishment appear to be central to your procreation. We intercepted your broadcasts, informational transmissions, instructional demonstrations, even ceremonial songs about their usage. The officers exchanged incredulous looks. Dr. Carter, however, narrowed her eyes. Wait, are you saying you're not human? Realizing deception would only complicate matters further, RHLT dropped their human accent and spoke in the resonant tones of their species. I am RHLT, an emissary of the Galactic collective. My people have observed your world and detected a critical vulnerability in your reproductive process. These devices appear to be vital. I was sent to procure them before it is too late. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. The shorter officer finally broke it. Okay, I'm calling for backup. Dr. Carter shot her a sharp look. No, wait. Let's not jump to conclusions. She turned back to RHLT. You're saying your people think these devices are necessary for human survival? Yes. RHLT nodded gravely. The evidence is overwhelming. Your broadcasts are saturated with references to their importance. Dr. Carter's lips twitched, but she quickly composed herself. I think there's been a massive misunderstanding. RHLT tilted their head. Explain? She gestured for the officers to give them space. Reluctantly, they stepped back, though they remained watchful. Dr. Carter then leaned in closer to RHLT. Those devices aren't for reproduction. They're, recreational. RHLT blinked, their translator struggling to interpret the nuance. Recreational? How does that ensure genetic propagation? It doesn't, Dr. Carter said, trying to keep a straight face. Humans reproduce without them just fine. They're optional. Not essential. RHLT stared at her, their mind racing to reconcile this information. Your broadcasts imply otherwise. The focus on these items is unparalleled. Their acquisition is celebrated. Their use is exalted. Dr. Carter sighed. Advertising. It's not literal. Companies market these things to sell them, not because they're necessary. For the first time, RHLT's confidence faltered. Are you saying my mission is flawed? Very, Dr. Carter said, though not unkindly. She could see the genuine concern in RHLT's eyes, or what passed for eyes in their human form. Before she could continue, the officers returned, this time joined by a growing crowd of curious onlookers. Someone had started recording the scene on their phone. Listen, Dr. Carter said, grabbing RHLT's arm. You're not going to get anywhere explaining this in public. Come with me. I'll help you figure this out. RHLT hesitated, glancing at the officers, then at the devices in their arms. Will you assist me in saving your species? Dr. Carter smirked. Something like that. But first, we're going to have to redefine your mission parameters. 20 minutes later, RHLT sat in the cramped but cluttered office of Dr. Carter's lab. The walls were lined with bookshelves crammed with scientific journals, anatomical models, and various artifacts of human curiosity. Dr. Carter placed a steaming mug of coffee in front of RHLT and took a seat across from them. All right, RHLT. Let's start from the beginning. Why does your species think we're so fragile? RHLT straightened. Our observations suggest your species relies heavily on external tools for survival. These devices appear to be a logical extension of that dependence. Dr. Carter leaned back, folding her arms. Humans are a lot tougher than you think. Sure, we use tools, but we've survived countless challenges without the things you're talking about. In fact, reproduction is one of the few things we've managed without advanced technology for millennia. RHLT's expression darkened. If that is true, then my mission has been based on false premises. My people will not take this revelation lightly. Dr. Carter grinned. Welcome to Earth. Misunderstandings are kind of our thing. But hey, if your species is willing to learn, I think we can clear this up together. RHLT hesitated, then gave a slow nod. Very well. I entrust this endeavor to you, Dr. Carter. But know this, failure is not an option. Dr. Carter raised an eyebrow, her grin widening. With stakes this high, how could I let you down? RHLT sat on a swiveling stool in Dr. Carter's lab, surrounded by human anatomical charts and specimens preserved in glass jars. The items they had painstakingly acquired from the shop lay sprawled on a nearby table, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Though their human disguise remained intact, the unease of failure gnawed at their core. You're sure about this? RHLT asked, their voice tinged with disbelief. None of these objects are critical to your species' procreation? Dr. Carter suppressed a laugh as she pointed at a particularly garish, spiral-shaped object. I can promise you that no human life has ever depended on that thing. If anything, this misunderstanding says more about your species' assumptions than ours. RHLT tilted their head, their translator struggling to parse her casual tone. Then why do your broadcasts emphasize their importance so heavily? The energy expenditure alone. Marketing, Dr. Carter interrupted, pulling up a slideshow on her computer. The screen filled with flashy ads, overly cheerful actors and exaggerated claims. Humans are emotional creatures. We buy things not because we need them but because we think they'll make us happy. Or, entertained? RHLT's shimmering eyes narrowed. This concept eludes me. My people prioritize necessity over indulgence. Resources are allocated with precision and care. Dr. Carter leaned back in her chair, arms folded. Maybe that's the difference between us. Humans aren't just survivors, we're dreamers. We thrive on creativity even if it leads to, well, she gestured to the table. RHLT fell silent, their mind churning with this revelation. Could it be that the Galactics, for all their technological sophistication, had underestimated the chaotic ingenuity of humans? Their reflection was interrupted by a sharp knock at the lab door. Before Dr. Carter could respond, it swung open, revealing a stern-faced woman in a crisp government suit. Behind her stood two heavily armed men in tactical gear. Dr. Carter, the woman said briskly, I'm Agent Miranda Hayes with the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. We need to talk. Dr. Carter frowned. That was fast. What's this about? Agent Hayes stepped inside, her sharp gaze landing on RHLT. We've been monitoring the incident downtown. Your guest here isn't exactly inconspicuous. We need to assess the potential threat to national security. RHLT stiffened, their human guise flickering for a fraction of a second before stabilizing. I'm no threat. My mission is one of preservation, not harm. Agent Hayes raised an eyebrow. You came to Earth to buy adult novelties to save humanity. Forgive me if I'm skeptical. Dr. Carter stepped between them. Agent Hayes, I've been talking with RHLT, and I can assure you this is a huge misunderstanding. Their species interpreted our cultural signals in the most hilariously wrong way possible. That may be, Hayes replied, her tone icy, but an alien presence on Earth is no laughing matter. If their leaders think we're incapable of survival, what stops them from deciding we're not worth preserving? RHLT interjected, their voice firm. The Galactics Collective does not destroy needlessly. However, failure to acquire what we perceive as critical assets would justify intervention for your species' own good. Dr. Carter paled. You mean, they'd invade? RHLT hesitated. Not invasion, as you understand it, but we would integrate Earth into our systems. Guide you toward better methods of survival. Agent Hayes snorted. Sounds like conquest with extra steps. RHLT ignored the jab. If we believed humanity faced extinction, we would act in what we see as your best interest. That is our mandate. Dr. Carter pinched the bridge of her nose. Okay, so let's say we convince the Galactics that humanity isn't in danger. What happens then? RHLT tilted their head. They will require proof. Evidence that your species can sustain itself without intervention. Agent Hayes crossed her arms. And if we can't provide that? RHLT's gaze was unyielding. Then the decision will not be yours to make. The weight of the situation hung heavily in the air as the group convened around Dr. Carter's desk. She was already formulating a plan. All right, she began, if we're going to convince your people that we're doing just fine, we'll need to show them the truth about humanity. Our history, our resilience, our adaptability. Agent Hayes raised an eyebrow. You think a history lesson is going to stop a technologically advanced species from meddling in our affairs? Dr. Carter shrugged. If they're as logical as RHLT claims, it might work. We just have to frame it in a way they'll understand. RHYLT leaned forward. I will relay your findings to my superiors, but time is limited. The collective grows impatient. Then we'd better get started, Dr. Carter said, pulling out a whiteboard and scribbling furiously. First, we'll highlight human ingenuity. Agriculture, medicine, space exploration, things that demonstrate our ability to overcome challenges without external help. Agent Hayes tapped her foot impatiently. Fine, but we also need to address the elephant in the room. Those ats. If their leaders saw enough of them to think they're essential, they might not take kindly to being told they're meaningless fluff. Dr. Carter nodded. Good point. We'll need to frame it as a misunderstanding, not incompetence. Humans value entertainment and freedom of expression. Those ads are just a side effect of that. RHLT observed the exchange with a growing sense of unease. For all their chaos and contradictions, these humans displayed an uncanny ability to adapt under pressure. It was both inspiring and disconcerting. I will assist in presenting your case, they said finally. But know this, the Galactics do not tolerate deception. Your evidence must be compelling. Dr. Carter met their gaze, determination gleaming in her eyes. Don't worry. If there's one thing humans are good at, it's proving people wrong. RHLT considered her words and gave a slow nod. Then let us proceed. The fate of your world depends on it. The small conference room in Dr. Carter's lab was now a makeshift command center. A projector whirred softly, displaying images of human ingenuity, the Great Pyramids, moon landings, advances in medicine, and bustling cities teeming with life. Around the table sat RHLT, Dr. Carter, and Agent Hayes, each wearing an expression that reflected their respective stakes in the matter. Agent Hayes broke the silence first. We can't just tell them we're fine and call it a day. If the Galactics are as advanced as RHLT says, they'll demand hard evidence, not anecdotes. Dr. Carter nodded, tapping her pen against her notebook. Agreed. That's why we're starting with the basics. Biological resilience. RHLT, I'll need you to relay this to your superiors. Humans don't need external devices for reproduction, and our history proves it. RHYLT, who had been studying a diagram of human DNA on the screen, looked up. Your resilience is indeed remarkable. But the Galactics will view these images as antiquated. They need proof of your adaptability in real time. Something measurable. Agent Hayes leaned forward, her fingers steepled. How measurable are we talking? A census? Live footage? What exactly are we dealing with here? RHLT hesitated, their human guys flickering slightly as they processed. The collective values efficiency. Statistical models, technological milestones, and physiological data would be persuasive. However, they also respect displays of ingenuity, proof that your species can overcome adversity without external aid. Dr. Carter frowned. You're suggesting we put on a show? Precisely, RHLT said. Your species thrives on displays of capability. If you can demonstrate this, it may sway the collective's judgment. The first step was gathering data. Dr. Carter's lab transformed into a hub of human achievement. Specialists from various fields contributed information. Graphs showing declining mortality rates, blueprints for groundbreaking medical devices, and projections of Earth's population growth. This is good, Dr. Carter murmured as she examined the influx of data. But it's all very dry. We need something visual, something they'll feel. Agent Hayes grinned. I know just the thing. We've been working on a high-tech VR experience for first contact scenarios. It's immersive, showcases human history, and explains our biology in ways even a Martian could understand. We can tweak it for the Galactics. RHYLT's interest peaked. An immersive experience? This may indeed resonate with the collective. Our kind values simulations for their accuracy. Dr. Carter brightened. Perfect. Let's load it with examples of human perseverance. Fighting pandemics, surviving natural disasters, thriving in space. We'll show them what we're capable of. The next hurdle was communication. The Galactic's vessel orbited Earth silently, but its presence loomed like a specter. RHYLT activated a sleek wrist device, and a holographic interface shimmered to life. I will request an audience, they said, their voice calm but resolute. Dr. Carter and Agent Hayes watched as a distorted image of a Galactic's elder appeared, a towering figure of translucent, shifting hues. Its many tendrils moved with precision, a visual representation of authority and wisdom. Aryu, the elder's voice resonated, a harmonic melody of disapproval. You have delayed too long. Have you acquired the devices necessary for Earth's survival? RHYLT hesitated. Elder Zyrex, there has been a misunderstanding. The devices are not essential to human reproduction. They are recreational. Xyrex's tendrils froze, then quivered with what could only be interpreted as confusion. Explain? Dr. Carter stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace. Elder Xyrex, my name is Dr. Mia Carter. I'm a scientist here on Earth, and I'd like to present evidence that humanity is not in danger. In fact, we've thrived for millennia without the intervention of advanced species. Xyrex's gaze shifted to her. You dare speak for your species? Agent Hayes stepped beside her. She's not alone. I'm Agent Miranda Hayes, representing Earth's defense and diplomatic efforts. What you're about to see will prove that we don't need saving. RHYLT nodded solemnly. I vouch for these humans. Their findings warrant your consideration. The elder considered them for a moment before speaking. Proceed. But know this, if your evidence fails to convince the collective, we will act in accordance with our mandate. The VR presentation was set up in an abandoned warehouse, chosen for its seclusion and size. The Galactic sent a delegation of 2 observers, their towering, semi-translucent forms glowing faintly under Earth's atmosphere. RHYLT acted as the intermediary, ensuring protocol was followed. Dr. Carter donned the VR equipment and initiated the program. The Galactic's observers watched intently as the immersive display unfolded. They saw humanity's struggles and triumphs. Early civilizations mastering fire, farmers cultivating harsh lands, doctors fighting plagues, and astronauts walking on the moon. The narrative was accompanied by data overlays, charts demonstrating technological progress, statistics highlighting human resilience, and timelines mapping the exponential growth of human knowledge. This, Dr. Carter said, her voice steady, is who we are. We may not be perfect, but we've adapted to every challenge. Our strength lies not in external devices, but in our ingenuity, cooperation, and determination. The Galactic's observers stood motionless as the simulation ended, their forms flickering faintly. Finally, one of them turned to RHYLT. This evidence is compelling. Humanity's survival instincts are undeniable. The second observer added, yet their reliance on recreation and indulgence is troubling. It may impede their progress. Dr. Carter smirked. Indulgence isn't weakness. It's a sign of our creativity. We've turned leisure into art, entertainment into culture. That's how we grow. The observers exchanged a long, silent communication before addressing RHYLT. We will relay this to the collective. Until then, Earth remains under observation. The days following the Galactic's delegation's visit were tense. Dr. Carter, Agent Hayes, and RHYLT remained in close communication, awaiting the collective's final decision. Despite the initial positive reception of the evidence they presented, no one could shake the nagging feeling that the Galactics might not be fully convinced. RHYLT spent hours in private communication with the collective, relaying every nuance of their discussions and carefully reporting on humanity's capacity for ingenuity. In return, their superior sent cryptic messages, filled with data, calculations, and stern warnings about the potential risks of human survival. You can't deny it any longer, Agent Hayes said one evening, pacing in Dr. Carter's lab. The collective is waiting for a reason to step in. They want us to prove we're worthy of existing on our own. Dr. Carter stared at the glowing projections on her workbench. It's not enough that we've survived for millennia. We're humans, we've always been driven by more than just survival. We create, we explore, we dream. That's what we need to show them. RHLT, who had been silently observing from a corner of the room, nodded thoughtfully. I've communicated your arguments to my people. They are intrigued by your culture, but they remain unconvinced by your explanations. They fear that humanity's pursuit of comfort may hinder your true potential. What do they want? Dr. Carter's voice was tight, frustration bubbling under her words. We've given them everything. Our biology, our history, our capacity for survival and creativity. What else can we prove? RHYLT hesitated, looking away briefly. There is one more step. It is something the collective values above all else. Your willingness to confront your limitations. To face destruction and choose to rebuild. To show that your species can rise when faced with true extinction. Agent Hayes raised an eyebrow. You're saying they want us to fail? To show them we can survive an existential threat? RHYLT nodded slowly. Yes. It is the ultimate test of any species. The collective believes that only through facing destruction can a species evolve to reach its full potential. Dr. Carter stared at RHYLT in disbelief. That's insane. They want us to put ourselves at risk to prove we're worthy of survival? That's not just cruel, it's reckless. It is the Calatrix way, RHLT replied solemnly. We believe that a species' true strength is revealed when pushed to the brink. Only then can it be trusted to adapt, innovate, and transcend its weaknesses. The idea hung heavily in the air, an impossible choice pressing down on their shoulders. It was clear now that the Calatrix were not simply looking for data. They wanted to see humanity face its worst fears and still find a way to thrive. Dr. Carter paced the room, her mind racing. What are we supposed to do then? Start a war? Introduce a disaster we can't control? Agent Hayes put her hands on her hips. That might actually be their plan. They want us to be desperate enough to show what we're capable of when we're in the deepest trouble. If we don't have a real catastrophe, they'll think we're too weak to evolve. I refuse to let humanity be tested like that, Dr. Carter said firmly. There has to be another way. Something that shows our strength without destroying us. RHLT seemed to consider her words carefully. There is another way. It would not be easy, but it would demonstrate your species' resilience in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. What is it? Dr. Carter asked, her curiosity piqued despite herself. You must create your own crisis, RHLT said. You must simulate a challenge so overwhelming that it threatens to undo everything you have built, and then show how you overcome it. Your species' greatest strength is in adaptation. You must force the system to bend and prove you can reshape it. Dr. Carter took a deep breath, trying to digest the enormity of the suggestion. You're saying we create an artificial disaster, and then solve it? Not just any disaster, RHLT responded. The collective would need to see humanity in action, working together. It must be something that strains every aspect of your society, your economy, your technology, your biology. A problem too big to ignore, and one that requires the cooperation of all your people. Agent Hayes stared at RHLT, a glint of realization in her eyes. Wait a second, you mean a simulated crisis? A massive global challenge like a virus or an energy collapse? Something we can actually control but still make it look like the world's about to fall apart? That is the idea, RHLT affirmed. The next week was a blur of frantic planning and backroom negotiations. Dr. Carter, Agent Hayes, and a select group of global leaders and scientists convened in secrecy, hashing out a plan that would be both ambitious and audacious. A simulated global disaster that would test every facet of human capability and innovation, but one they could keep in check. The idea they settled on was a global collapse simulation. They would simulate a breakdown in communication and supply chains on a global scale, testing the adaptability of various nations, industries, and systems. It would challenge human ingenuity, cooperation, and survival instincts. The plan involved shutting down key parts of the global economy, disrupting communications, and engineering a massive energy crisis that would demand an immediate and innovative response. But it was a double-edged sword. If the simulation went wrong, the consequences would be catastrophic. A global collapse, even a controlled one, could leave millions in chaos and uncertainty. And if it failed to impress the Calatrix, Earth's fate would be sealed. You're asking us to gamble with the future of humanity, Dr. Carter said, standing before the assembled leaders in a shadowed conference room. We need to make it clear that we're not just survivors, we are creators. We'll build solutions out of the ashes of this disaster. The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation settled in. Agent Hayes nodded grimly. The stakes have never been higher. But we have no choice. If we don't convince the Calatrix, Earth could face the same fate as many species before us. An existence dictated by external forces, not by our own will. RHLT stood off to the side, watching the human leaders with a mixture of concern and fascination. You have chosen your path. I hope it is enough to prove your worth. As the leaders moved to finalize the details, Dr. Carter exchanged a glance with RHLT. The fate of humanity now rested on a single risky decision. One that would determine whether Earth would stand on its own or fall under the control of the Calatrix. There's no going back now, Dr. Carter said softly. Let's hope we're ready. The simulation began with a chilling, calculated precision. A vast network of global leaders, scientists, and engineers had worked in secrecy for weeks, crafting an artificial crisis so real, so deeply disruptive, that it could mimic the worst potential collapse humanity might face. This wasn't just about economic or technological breakdowns. This was a holistic approach that targeted every layer of society, political, social, and infrastructural. The world was plunged into chaos, but it was controlled chaos. Dr. Carter stood in a command center, her eyes glued to the large digital map showing the cascading effects of the simulated disaster. News feeds across the globe lit up with urgent reports. Widespread communication failures, blackouts plunging entire countries into darkness, supply chains severed, and mass migrations as people fled from areas deemed unsafe. Global stock markets fluctuated wildly, sending ripples of panic through economies. The crisis was everywhere. The plan was simple: demonstrate that humanity could not only survive, but innovate, adapt, and rebuild. But the execution was anything but simple. Status update? Dr. Carter asked, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of tension. Global comms are down in the US and parts of Europe, a technician responded. Power grids are offline in several regions, and there's a serious spike in resource shortages across Africa and Asia. Emergency protocols are being enacted, but we're seeing some countries faltering. Dr. Carter's stomach tightened. What about the energy crisis simulation? Is it activating as planned? Another technician looking over their screen nodded. It's in effect. Renewable energy sources are being taxed to the limit while fossil fuels are being blocked to simulate a complete halt. The plan is working, too well in some areas. We might need to ease off the pressure. Not yet, Dr. Carter said firmly. We have to show the Galactics that we can face the impossible and come through it. Agent Hayes, who had been observing the simulations from a nearby station, approached. How's it looking? She asked, her arms crossed. It's working, Dr. Carter said, her eyes not leaving the map. But I can't shake the feeling that we're gambling with more than just data here. If something goes wrong? If something goes wrong, Hayes interrupted, her voice steady, we'll handle it. We've prepared for every contingency. This is the only shot we have to prove we're more than just survivors. Dr. Carter glanced at Hayes, then back at the digital map. I just hope it's enough. Across the globe, humanity was reacting with a mix of determination and panic. Governments activated their emergency protocols, military and civilian organizations mobilized, and scientists scrambled to come up with solutions to the escalating crises. In the cities, where power was out and resources were dwindling, people began to innovate. Engineers worked to reroute energy from emergency backup grids, reprogramming them on the fly to provide essential services. Farmers set up makeshift hydroponic farms in the streets, growing food for communities that had been cut off from supply lines. In other parts of the world, entire industries were shut down. The collapse of international shipping networks caused a domino effect, with critical goods like medicine, food, and fuel becoming scarce. Yet, even under extreme duress, human ingenuity began to shine through. Makeshift communication networks were set up using radio frequencies, and communities pooled resources to find solutions. The simulation was playing out as it had been planned. But even as humanity began to rise to the challenge, RHLT watched with a growing sense of apprehension. They had always known that human adaptability was a force to be reckoned with, but witnessing it firsthand, the desperation, the creativity, the resilience, was different. This is more than we anticipated, RHLT muttered to themselves, pacing around the command center. They hadn't expected the human drive to adapt to be so fierce. Dr. Carter noticed RHLT's unsettled demeanor. What is it? RHLT paused, looking up. I had believed that humanity's survival instinct would be your greatest strength, but what I see now is something deeper. It is not just survival you seek. It is transcendence. Dr. Carter raised an eyebrow. Transcendence? I thought you were here to judge our survival, not our spiritual journey. RHLT's eyes shimmered with a mix of fascination and concern. What I mean is this: your species does not simply react to a challenge. You fight back and then you create from it. You do not just repair, you innovate. You do not simply endure, you evolve. The simulation reached its peak in the next few days. Panic began to rise as resources became more scarce. Emergency measures were stretched to their limits, and the strain on humanity's global network was palpable. Some countries faltered under the weight of the crisis, while others adapted faster than anyone had anticipated. In India, engineers had designed new hybrid solar panels that could be constructed in a matter of hours from local materials, providing power to isolated regions. In Brazil, scientists used their knowledge of ecosystems to repurpose rainwater collection systems, ensuring communities had access to clean water even in the face of infrastructure failure. In the United States, a coalition of tech giants had deployed a fleet of drones to deliver medical supplies to areas where roads were impassable. And in Europe, a coalition of countries led by Germany had set up a vast network of communication hubs to restore information flow, using nothing more than old radio frequencies and satellite dishes. The ripple effect of humanity's ingenuity was being felt across the globe. Communities that had once been heavily dependent on external aid were now becoming self-sustaining, offering help to neighboring nations. The Calatrix were watching but not in silence. Their monitoring drones hovered overhead, their scans detecting the rapidly shifting dynamics on Earth. The Calatrix had predicted that humanity's efforts would be chaotic, but they had not expected this level of cooperation. They had underestimated humanity's ability to rise, to innovate, and to build anew in the face of destruction. RHYLT, standing before the control panel, watched as Earth's inhabitants began to stabilize. It was no longer just a question of survival, it was a testament to the very spirit of humanity. This was not a species that simply clung to life. They were using this crisis as an opportunity to redefine what life meant. Dr. Carter watched RHYLT carefully, sensing the change. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. RHYLT's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Perhaps we were wrong about you." The Calatrix Collective had been watching. Not just with surveillance drones and scanners, but with something deeper, more perceptive. They had been observing humanity's capacity for adaptation, innovation, and unity in the face of overwhelming adversity. And now, after days of careful analysis, the verdict was imminent. Dr. Carter sat in a quiet, dimly lit room with Agent Hayes and RE, the weight of the past week's events pressing down on her shoulders. The crisis simulation had run its course, but the decision from the collective still hung in the balance. RHYLT had remained in close contact with the Calatrix, serving as their liaison, yet even they couldn't predict what the collective's final response would be. The question of whether Earth would be allowed to continue its path, free from Calatrix intervention, or if humanity would be forced into submission was now a matter of the highest stakes. "I don't know what to expect," Dr. Carter said, her voice tight with uncertainty. "I've seen humanity come together in ways I couldn't have imagined. But the Calatrix, will they see it as enough?" Agent Hayes leaned forward, her hands folded. "We've done everything we could. Humanity pulled through a simulated collapse like a champion. We've proven that we're adaptable, inventive, and resilient. If the collective can't see that, then they never will." RHYLT, who had been silently observing them, spoke up with a tone of uncertainty. "What I've seen from your species these past days, I have never encountered anything like it. You are not just a species that survives, you evolve and transcend. The collective may have underestimated you." Dr. Carter glanced at RHYLT. "Do you believe we have a chance?" RHYLT hesitated, their alien form flickering slightly. "It is not my judgment to make. But I have presented the evidence to the collective. I have explained your spirit." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Earth's fate was now in the hands of an alien species that had watched civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy. The Calatrix had seen countless worlds struggle for survival. Yet, something about humanity had sparked their interest. Something that went beyond the technical aspects of survival and adaptation. The moment came swiftly. A hologram flickered to life in the middle of the room, and the familiar form of Elder Zyrex, the Calatrix leader, appeared in all their towering, translucent glory. Their voice was a deep, harmonic resonance that filled the room with a sense of both authority and weight. "Dr. Mia Carter, Agent Miranda Hayes, and RHYLT of the Calatrix," Zyrex's voice echoed. "We have reviewed the evidence, the simulations, and your species' actions in the wake of crisis. And we have reached a decision." Dr. Carter held her breath, her heart pounding. Agent Hayes' posture was tense, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. RHYLT stood still, their form radiating a quiet intensity. Elder Zyrex continued, "The Calatrix Collective has observed your species with great interest. You have demonstrated an ability to rise above mere survival. You have shown an unparalleled capacity for innovation, resilience, and, most importantly, cooperation in the face of destruction." Dr. Carter's fingers tightened into fists. "Could it be? The collective had originally planned to impose order upon your species," Zyrex continued. "We believed you were incapable of thriving without intervention. But after reviewing your actions, it is clear that humanity does not simply react to challenges. It actively shapes its destiny." RHYLT let out a soft breath, their eyes betraying a glimmer of approval. Dr. Carter felt her heart rate accelerate. This was it. The moment of truth. "Therefore," Zyrex intoned, "the Calatrix Collective has decided to allow humanity to continue its existence without intervention. Your species has proven that it possesses the necessary qualities to evolve on its own. You will not be subject to our control." A wave of relief swept over Dr. Carter, and she felt the weight of the last several weeks lift from her shoulders. Agent Hayes exhaled audibly, her stern exterior giving way to a brief, triumphant smile. Even RHYLT's form seemed to pulse with a subtle vibrancy, a reflection of the monumental decision. But, Zyrex added, their voice shifting to a more somber tone, this decision comes with a condition. Dr. Carter's relief faltered for a moment, and Agent Hayes' smile wavered. What kind of condition? Dr. Carter asked, her voice betraying her concern. The Calatrix Collective will continue to observe your species from afar, Zyrex clarified. We will monitor your progress and your failures. Should you falter, should you fall into patterns of self-destruction, stagnation, or aggression that endanger your survival and the balance of the cosmos, your planet will be placed under our guardianship. We will step in. Understood, Dr. Carter said, her voice firm. We will prove that humanity can handle its own future. Zyrex inclined their head, a gesture that was both regal and contemplative. We do not take this decision lightly. The fate of your species is intertwined with the greater harmony of the universe. You have earned this chance, but know that your path will not be free from challenges. Nothing worth having ever is, Agent Hayes replied with a smile that was more fierce than relieved. Zyrex's image flickered as though they were preparing to depart, but then in a moment of rare warmth, they added, and know this, the collective has great respect for your kind. Your potential is vast. With those final words, the hologram of Zyrex dissipated, leaving a profound silence in its wake. The room erupted in quiet celebration. Dr. Carter, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the decision, couldn't suppress a smile. Hayes slapped her on the back, her grin wide. We did it. We actually did it. RHLT nodded, their voice softer than usual. You have not only survived, you have earned the right to shape your future. We'll make sure we don't squander it, Dr. Carter said, the weight of the moment settling in. But even as they stood in the aftermath of the decision, a sobering thought lingered in the back of Dr. Carter's mind. The Calatrix Collective had granted humanity its freedom, but the real work had only just begun. Earth's future was now in its own hands. The path forward would be fraught with challenges. No species could ever truly know what awaited it, especially not in a universe as vast and unpredictable as the one the Calatrix represented. But humanity had proven something extraordinary. It had not only survived, it had thrived. It had earned its place among the stars. And now the universe would be watching. The decision from the Calatrix Collective had shifted the course of humanity's future, but the weight of that freedom, that unspoken challenge to prove its worth, was not something Dr. Carter, Agent Hayes, or RHLT could easily ignore. As the months passed after the Calatrix's verdict, Earth was left to rebuild not just its infrastructure, but its very way of thinking. It was clear that the simulation had been a watershed moment, but humanity had come to realize that survival was no longer enough. Now it was about transcending their old limitations, about becoming the species the Calatrix had seen potential in. Humanity had been granted the gift of autonomy, but it was a fragile gift, one that could easily be revoked if they failed to rise to the occasion. It was a burden but also an opportunity, one that no one could afford to waste. Dr. Carter had become a public figure in the months following the Calatrix's decision. Interviews, conferences, and policy discussions had all been centered around the new era that humanity had entered. Earth's leaders were now under intense scrutiny, not just from their own people but from the rest of the galaxy, in ways they had never expected. She stood in a vast auditorium, speaking to a crowd that was far larger than she'd ever anticipated. Her words had become a rallying cry, not just for humanity's survival, but for its ascension into something greater. This is a new age, she said, her voice echoing through the hall. A time where we must no longer simply react to the world around us but reshape it. The Calatrix granted us our future, but it is our responsibility to prove that we can handle it. We have been given a chance, but only through innovation, unity, and the pursuit of progress will we demonstrate that we are worthy of this gift. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Dr. Carter felt the weight of their expectations pressing on her shoulders. Humanity had already demonstrated its potential to survive, but now it was time to prove it could evolve. Agent Hayes had returned to her role with the government, taking on a leadership position in the efforts to integrate the lessons learned from the simulation into real-world applications. She had become a voice of reason in a time of global change, pushing for cooperation between nations, industries, and scientists to drive forward the innovations humanity needed to thrive. The Calatrix will be watching, she said in a meeting with world leaders. But we must remember they're not watching with the same kind of expectation as before. They believe in us now. We've shown them we can survive, but the next phase is the hardest. We have to build the future, not just manage the present. Her words resonated deeply with those around the table. Leaders who had once been focused solely on maintaining order in the wake of the crisis were now looking to the long term. They began to collaborate in ways they never had before, pooling resources for research, technology development, and social reforms. The idea of global cooperation had taken on new meaning. Humanity had become a collective force in a way it never had before. The first steps had been taken in the wake of the collapse simulation, but now the world was ready for more than just recovery, it was ready for a renaissance. RHYLT2 had not been immune to the shift. Though they had been a spectator in the decision-making process, they were now an active part of humanity's forward momentum. No longer simply a liaison, RHYLT had become an advisor, offering insights into how their species' own history had shaped its rise to power and stability. They are working together, RHYLT observed, watching Earth's progress from their isolated station on the outskirts of the solar system. I did not expect this level of unity. Dr. Carter, who had been in regular communication with RHYLT, responded thoughtfully, humanity is capable of more than it gives itself credit for. We have a tendency to fight each other, but when the stakes are high enough, we come together. It's in our DNA. RHYLT nodded. I have seen this firsthand. When the simulation began, your species was fractured, struggling to cope. But now I see something different. The fear that divided your world has transformed into a collective desire to prove yourselves. Perhaps this is how a species grows into something greater. But RHYLT knew that the greatest challenges were still to come. Despite humanity's new resolve, there were forces at work that no one could yet predict. Technological advancements were moving at a rapid pace, and while they held the potential for prosperity, they also posed immense risks. The delicate balance between progress and destruction would remain a thin line. Earth's technological progress became evident as soon as governments and corporations began to implement the solutions forged during the global simulation. Power grids were upgraded, energy systems shifted away from fossil fuels, and the development of clean, sustainable energy sources surged ahead faster than ever before. New methods of resource distribution, born from the lessons of the crisis, began to take root. Efficient systems for food production, resource recycling, and waste management were established. Society, once teetering on the brink, began to flourish again, not as a patchwork of disconnected nations but as a united front. But innovation was not limited to technology. Humanity had begun to rethink its social structures. Education systems adapted, fostering collaboration and critical thinking in younger generations. Instead of focusing solely on material gain, the collective vision shifted to a focus on human potential, the pursuit of knowledge, creativity, and harmony with the planet. And yet, even as humanity soared to new heights, the specter of the Galatrix's watchful eyes remained. Though the collective had granted Earth autonomy, they had made one thing clear: humanity's right to self-determination was not permanent. They had been given the opportunity to prove themselves, but their future would be determined by the decisions they made in the years to come. Dr. Carter often found herself gazing out at the stars, pondering the vastness of the universe and the weight of the responsibility now on Earth's shoulders. The Galatrix had given humanity a chance, but the universe was still a place of chaos and competition. The next steps would be crucial. Would humanity continue to rise, to transcend its primal instincts and evolve into something worthy of the Galatrix's respect? Or would it fall into the same destructive patterns that had doomed countless civilizations before it? Dr. Carter didn't know the answers. No one did. But for the first time in humanity's history, they were in control of their own destiny. The Galatrix had given them that. And now, it was up to Earth to prove that it was worthy of the stars. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.